Hi, y'all. I'm Nikki Hines. I'm a realtor at Porchlight Realty. I have just started this, so this is new. Ride the wave with us. But this is Misty and James Hale. They're actually 4-time clients. We have sold, and bought.
That's right.
Over the last 4 years. It has been a wild ride. Y'all tell us a little bit about you, about your experiences, and how real estate and all of this came together.
Yeah, of course. So I'm James.
I'm Misty.
And we're the Hales. Cheesy stuff aside, we're settled here in Arkansas now. So 20 years military, so that led to a lot of moving. We always tried to take advantage of the ability to use our basic allowance for housing, BAH, for those that aren't in the military. You get a stipend for housing. So we always tried to take advantage of our military stipend and buy when it made the most sense. So in the last 20 years, we have bought and sold a total of 15 real estate transactions.
A few.
So we've bought 8, sold 7, and that totals just over $3.5 million in the last 20 years. And it's been a journey. We've learned a couple of things.
A couple,
and
hopefully.
I suspect that we might talk about a few of those today.
Yes.
But that's the Hales in a nutshell.
Okay, and he's not bragging enough about himself because his brain, I always say he's the biggest nerd I know, and I mean that in the most endearing way ever. You can shoot something at him like, estimate this, estimate that, and he's like, done, blah, blah, blah. So give us a little bit of background into how you manage finances, what your job is now,
Sure.
kind of the background as to why you are the nerd you are.
Okay, yeah, right.
In the most endearing way.
I appreciate the setup. So I joined the Air Force in 2004, and I was a vehicle operator. Basically, it means I drove things. And I did that for about 6 years, and I got recruited by an organization called the Office of Special Investigations. So I was a special agent with OSI for almost 10 years. A lot of analytical work comes into that, criminal investigations, counterintelligence, stuff like that. And then after about 10 years of that space, it was time to make a transition. And I was 16 years in the Air Force at the time, and there wasn't a lot of career fields that were looking to pull in a 16-year time and service member, but Air Force Finance was on the list. And so in 2020, I made the jump over to Air Force Finance, and I ran a budget and accounting team. So that's basically overseeing the budget that it takes to run an Air Force installation. I think our portfolio at the time was just south of $100 million. And a team that managed that. And then I went to the schoolhouse for a couple of years. That's where I retired out of Mississippi. And we moved back to Arkansas for the job that I currently have. So what I currently do is I'm a budget analyst for the government. So dealing with numbers and decimals and spreadsheets and formulas and pivot tables.
All the spreadsheets.
And VLOOKUPs and all the things. That's what I do for a living. So I'm not special, but
Yes,
I would be lying if I said numbers didn't kind of come easily to me.
You always like to have a plan.
And I do. She's right. I always like to have a plan and a backup plan for that, and a backup plan for that.
Just a couple contingencies in there.
So right, and so in my military experience, you get comfortable with the acronym PACE. So you have a primary plan, an alternate plan, a contingency plan, an emergency plan.
And you do like your acronyms.
I do. 20 years in the military. That's one thing I don't think is ever going to leave. So so I'm acronym heavy, but that's what I do now. I'm a budget analyst for the government.
Perfect. So what is so funny about, I think, our relationship is I went into my listing appointment with Misty. You were MIA, didn't know who you were, didn't even know what he looked like because on Facebook there were no photos or anything in the home. There wasn't really any photos at that time either. And I sat down with Misty, and I was probably the most intimidated I've ever been. It was only like my 4th listing, I think, 3rd listing. So I was like, oh, these people are organized, like completely like I've got to be on my P's and Q's. And it's one of the highest listings I had at the time because it was so early in my career. As far as listing goes, because we've sold a few, what do you recommend as far as what you need to do to prepare, what you need to do for looking into an agent? Just kind of give me your crash course on listing homes.
Right, so listing a home, I think one of the things that you need to start off with is managing expectations. I think a lot of people enter this space with some false narratives. And what I mean by that is over the last several years, we have gotten this proliferation of the digital space, of digital technology, social media, namely. And that's a double-edged sword, right? There's a lot of good that comes out of that.
Pros and cons to everything.
And there's some challenges with that too. And so I think people, are quick to pull up a reel, and they're like, oh, well, this person listed their home and it was under contract in 20 minutes and they closed in 4 weeks and we made $100,000 on the deal. And it doesn't
Right.
always work like that.
Nope.
In fact, I would argue that's the exception and not the norm. So
Thank you.
when it comes to listing, and I'm going to say this term a few times, but managing expectations is really kind of a reoccurring theme, especially in the real estate space, whether you're on the listing side or the purchasing
Right.
side, because that street runs two ways. So I think that's really the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about listing a property.
Right.
Is you've got to be able to manage your expectations.
Yes.
And very, very, very closely related to that, you have to, the same as purchasing a property, you have to work with somebody that you get along with. This is a relationship of being symbiotic.
Right.
You need to be able to speak the same language. You need to be able to vibe, to use
Yes.
to use a word that is for people
You're so
younger than me.
trendy.
You need to be able to kind of get along and vibe with whoever it is that you're entering into that relationship
For
with.
sure.
So that's kind of the two things that come to my mind. Is there anything else that comes to your mind when you think about listing a property?
I mean, vibing. Like, I met Nikki. Like, you were at work and she had posted on social media. So she came
Good old
to the
social media.
house. And I was a new mom, and she was just so friendly and personable, and she just made me feel at ease. She kept watching Madison and saying how cute she was, and I just had like a good feeling from her. And she was
My
so
little best.
knowledgeable. So she was like, feel free to interview other real estate agents if you want to. And I was like, I don't think that's necessary at all. So I just think like you have to have a good feeling about the agent, first of all, and then listing
Right.
a house. It's all like
It's
staging,
a lot. It's a lot.
Staging, like declutter your house.
Which you're a
make
rock
sure it's
star at. You're
clean.
so good at it. Looking like you don't live there. I always joke like, people ask me like, what do we need to do? I'm like, well, does it look like it's out of a magazine? Because if it doesn't, like that's the
a really good
example.
point.
That's the standard. Like it doesn't need to look lived in. It needs to look clean. It needs to look photo ready. I mean,
Like a model home.
yes. And I hate to put it that way because it is people's homes. And so like, I don't want to pressure people to feel like, oh my gosh, it's got to be perfect, because it doesn't have to be. But I always joke because I have a seller's guide that I send, and I have a checklist, and I say, this is A++, but this is what makes the biggest difference in how your photos turn out, how your showings turn out. I mean, if you check every box, it's perfect. If you don't, it's not, you know, like, so I think that's a really good way to put it though.
Yeah.
Which you're phenomenal at. She's really good at
I've done
it.
a couple times.
You have done it a few times. So flip side, buying,
Right.
how would you guide someone through buying a home?
Yeah. So
Start with the budget if you'd like.
Yeah, exactly. You got to know what you can afford,
Yes.
and that actually kind of falls into what I've kind of constructed as the 5-step buying process. Right. I have, and not just me, we have purchased 8 homes over the years. So I want to start off by saying this: we're not experts in anything
Yes, huh?
other than how to learn from our mistakes. We've gotten really good at doing that, and we've made more than our fair share over the way. But like when I was in the military, I would have troops that would mess things up, and they would say, "Oh, Sergeant Hale, like I screwed this up. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Look, like we'll learn from it. We'll move on."
Yeah.
But the reality is, you have to have those missteps because that's where the learning occurs.
Right.
If you,
where you grow.
Exactly. And if you have those missteps and you don't learn from them, one, it's kind of a missed opportunity. But two, it's an opportunity you might not get back ever. And so I think that has never been lost on us. And as we've kind of made those mistakes, we've just threw it in the back pocket, another tool for the proverbial tool belt, and we try
Right.
to learn from it and move on. So like I was saying, I think all of your real estate transactions, at least on the buying side, come down to a 5-step process, right? You can have any variety of circumstances, but I think they'll all kind of fit into these same 5 steps. So when you're looking at purchasing a property, step number 1, you need to pick a realtor. Now, can you purchase a home without a realtor? Sure. You can do a lot of things without a professional. You can have somebody cut something out of you without it being a surgeon. I wouldn't recommend it.
Right.
Right? You're going into what is perhaps going to be the biggest financial decision that you ever make. And so why would you do it without somebody guiding you? So in my humble opinion, Step number one really needs to be picking a realtor. And there's some things that kind of go along with that. Step number two is going to be finding your house, right? Step number three, so you found your house, cool. What happens next? Now we need to
So
go.
much.
Now we need to go into that counter offer stage, and there's a lot that goes on with that. And then step number four is what I like to call get your ducks in the row. That's when you're communicating with your lender. That's when you're informing them of projected closing dates. That's when you're getting an inspection set up. That's when a lot of things are starting to unfold. That's going to make this see all the way through to step five, which is closing.
Owning a home.
And there's a lot that goes on with that too. So, I mean, if you want, we can kind of go step by step. But
Hit me.
in my opinion,
Yep.
that's really kind of the 5-step process that pretty much everybody is going to go through. Pick a realtor, find a home, offer, counter offer,
Yes.
get your ducks in a row, and close on the property.
I love it.
So
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. So
And every state is different. So if anybody does watch this from a different state,
yep.
it is different per state, but that is a really good way to put it no matter where you're at in the world.
Exactly. And
Because deadlines change, but
correct. That's been our experience, right? Because like I said,
you've been all over.
20 years in the military. We bought 2 houses in Missouri. We bought 2 houses in Florida. This is now our 2nd house in Arkansas. Third. I'm sorry, 3rd house in Arkansas. Right? You do it so many times I can't even remember how. So 3rd house in Arkansas, and we bought a house in Mississippi. So Missouri, Florida, Mississippi, Arkansas. And there's been things that like little nuanced differences,
Right.
but that same 5-step
It's true no
process,
matter what.
It's been true regardless of the state that we've been in. So step number one, find a realtor. Talk to your family, talk to your friends. Google is your friend. Look at reviews. Social media is huge. Social media is absolutely huge. As Misty mentioned earlier, our first property that we that we sold with you. That was 2023. It hit the market in late 22, December of 22.
Yep.
But she found you on Facebook.
Yep.
And she was looking for advice from other military moms in the community who have you had experiences with, good, bad, and different.
Yep.
And so social media was really kind of the catalyst for us that linked us with you.
Right.
And so social media cannot be overlooked in that as well.
No.
So there's a lot that goes into deciding to pick your real estate agent, right? I recommend people, interview real estate agents, especially if you're not getting the warm and fuzzy. Find somebody that is a good fit for you, because here's the thing: it's one thing to pick out a car mechanic.
Yeah.
Right? Wait until you've got $500,000 swinging in the balance. And you need somebody that is going to advise you on your blind spots.
Right.
Somebody that's going to help you with your offer and counteroffer strategy. And for anybody that thinks that there is no strategy when it comes to the offer and the counteroffer, you're kind of kidding yourself.
Right.
Because there 100% is a strategy, and any number of variables impacts that. We'll talk about that a little bit more momentarily. But there's a whole variety of variables that can influence that. So finding a good realtor is kind of that key piece that should be your jumping off point. Whenever you say, okay, I've decided I want to buy a property, or you and your family, you're going to make that leap. We're going to buy a property. Get a good real estate agent. If you're in this area, I highly encourage anybody to reach out to you. As you know, I've referred several of my associates to you.
They're so great.
I spend a lot of time in a space where you trust people at their word. It's just the nature of the business,
Right.
that I spent several years in. And so if I put my stamp of approval on something, I've now built that reputation that if James Hale puts his stamp of approval on somebody, he means it. Anyway, I digress on
true.
that point.
He does his research.
Whatever that person is for you, just do your due diligence in finding the right person.
Yeah.
And I would say that kind of summarily describes what step one is in picking an agent.
Right.
And and then that kind of segues us into step number 2, right? You got to find a home. So this is where you start noticing the value of your real estate agent, because they are a force multiplier for your time. Absolutely a force multiplier. You're now entering a space that maybe you have limited knowledge, limited
Right.
experience. And, if I'm being completely honest, it can be a little bit overwhelming. The majority of people that are probably going to watch this, or the majority of people out there that may never see this, but are just living their lives, they're going to buy a home one day, are working class folks. They get up in the morning, they go to work, they come home, spend time with the family on the weekends, get up
Right.
and do it all again the next week on Monday morning.
Right.
And that's kind of the little bubble that you live in. So if you've got a good quality real estate agent, somebody that you vibe with,
Yes.
right? That is somebody that's going to be taking your criteria that you've given them, and they're going to be scouring the market. They might have that market insight on something that meets your criteria that hasn't hit the market yet.
Yep.
And I'll kind of circle back to that momentarily. But having that agent that can kind of be your, be your representative, be your, be your advocate, and that goes to dealing with other agents.
Yeah.
That goes to setting up appointments and recommendations. A good quality agent is going to be a force multiplier for your time. But when you're talking about finding the right home, you have to start thinking about all these variables.
So many factors
that impact that. Number one, what is your budget, right? And a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to use any names. I don't want to get this podcast taken down, but there's real estate apps out there, right? Red or blue, pick one. But there's calculators, right? So you can go into these apps and put your stuff in the calculator.
And they're so wrong.
And they're going to give
they're going
to give you a number, but that number is not representative of reality.
No.
It might be representative of your interest rate. It might be representative of the accepted offer price.
Right.
It might even be close to representative of your escrow. So for those that don't know, your mortgage is kind of broken into 4 little quadrants, right? You've got your interest, your principal.
I love you so much.
You've got, but you've also, right? You've also got your taxes and your homeowner's insurance. And and people are quick to overlook this. And I get why.
But that's your payment.
But that's
your budget.
That's your payment, right? But so now ask yourself this. What happens if you live 20 minutes further down the road? Your fuel cost is going up to go to and from work. You might be shopping in a different town.
Right.
The prices in that town might be a little bit higher than what you've been used to paying in this town. So there's all these kind of extraneous things to consider
that add up
when you're factoring in. And what about the utility company? The utility company that you may now have might be just a little bit more expensive.
Right.
Oh, well, you're moving into a property that also has propane. Your stove and your water heater is running off propane. There's an additional cost.
Now you've doubled the cost. Yeah.
Right? So these are all things that you have to think about when you're saying, okay, I need to find the right home.
Yes.
So there is no one scenario. There's no one formula that is going to be right for everybody.
Right.
But I would just encourage folks, when you're deciding what you can afford, what your budget is, to really truly sit down and have an honest conversation with yourself. What am I willing to pay?
Look in the mirror.
Right. But seriously,
it's true. It's true.
What are you willing to pay?
A lot of people don't do it, and it's a problem. I mean, it's where we see when things happen with foreclosures and when people have to sell homes and they're in a crunch, and it's ugly and it's not fun. And trust me, if I never had to do another one where someone is on the brink of foreclosure, I would be the happiest person ever, because there's nothing fun about it.
And there's another reason that it's so important to do this in the first step, right? So people might say, well, James, it's common sense that you would want to think about those things.
Common's not common.
you would want to think about those things in step 2, which is finding a home. But here's a scenario I've seen play out on more than one occasion. So we're on the seller side. We have a house that's on the market, and somebody comes through, they fall in love with it, they give us a full price offer, maybe ask for a little bit of closing cost assistance. We'll talk about that here momentarily. But we go under contract, right? And now the train's moving. So we're under contract, they're ordering an inspection, and then one day something happens. It hits them. It hits them not only what their mortgage is going to be, how much their utilities are going to go up, because they're going from a 1,200 square foot house to a 2,200 square foot house.
Right.
They're living 15 minutes further away, so now they're doubling their fuel cost. That V8 that they drive to and from work every day, now it's not looking so appealing.
No.
Their homeowner's insurance is going to go up because guess what? It's
bigger house, more to insure.
It costs more to insure a bigger home,
Yes.
right? We have literally had deals fall apart, and the feedback that we got was, they didn't fully appreciate what they were getting into. So do yourself and
I think
the
we
seller,
have one of those.
right? So do yourself and the seller a favor. Get all of that stuff sorted out, and that's why I say, I don't choose my words by accident, right? Have an honest conversation with yourself on what you can afford.
Right.
Break the numbers down and talk through it. Talk through it multiple times.
Yes.
The last couple of transactions we've done, I guarantee you it was no less than 6 times that we ran the numbers to make sure we didn't overlook anything.
Right.
And we still allowed anywhere from 3 to 5% for overage for the things that you wind up having a streaming subscription that you didn't expect to have. Little things
You
like
splurged.
that. So in step 2, when you're finding a home, like really dial in your budget and work with your real estate agent. Be honest about what your criteria is. Everybody wants the most for the least amount, right?
Right.
If your budget is $200,000, you're probably not going to get 20 acres, 5 bed, 3 bath, 4,000 square feet.
Yes, they can. The house might not be livable, but
yeah, maybe. That has not been my experience.
it might need to be plowed over, but
Right.
And not to interject, because I know you might be getting there, but just as much as it's important to have a great realtor, the harping that on budget, a great lender will help you understand the
100%.
full cost of your
Absolutely.
mortgage, because
Yep.
this is the biggest difference I have seen, and I have been very spoiled because one of the best lenders in the area was my personal lender before I got into real estate, and I didn't realize how great she was until I got into real estate, and I was like, hold on, wait a minute, all these lenders don't do this. They don't walk you through the PITI, which is all the 4 quadrants. They don't walk you through your budget and walk you through, hey, this little difference here, that little difference here, this roof could cost your insurance more. Great lenders, it's a team, and it all comes together or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And lenders can make or break. Unfortunately, I've sat down with so many sellers who I'm like, hey, when you bought this house, did your lender tell you these things, like closing costs and this and that and that? And they're like, no, I didn't really. And people just don't read, which I can't sit here and say I am a fine line reader, but I am when it comes to real estate, because I've learned very quickly that it's not a few dollars.
But you should have a holistic understanding.
Please.
Yep.
There are so many people that just trust. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate when people trust me, but at the same time, ask questions and know what you're talking about. Like you said, even more so than looking in the mirror, ask them too. Make sure they understand, because there are lenders out there that they don't care if you can really afford it. You were approved for it. That doesn't mean you can actually make that payment when you add in your Hulu subscription and your gas and your groceries and all that. And that's where we see people, and that's a lot of people say, I'm just so scared I'll get foreclosed on one day or something like that. It's that's the difference right there. It's everything you just said.
Yep. So that's and so that kind of wraps up step number 2, really, which will take us into step number 3, which is now it's time for the counter offer strategy, and I'm using that word very deliberately, right? So let's backtrack for a second. Where'd we start? Finding a realtor. Okay, cool. Congratulations, you're in Central Arkansas. You decided you want to buy a property. You've gotten in touch with Nikki Hines, and you've said, hey, this is kind of like what I'm looking for.
Right.
And we've moved into step 2. We're finding the right home, and you've got your criteria mapped out. You know what you can afford. You know your budget is $275,000,
Right.
and you say, here's my minimum criteria: 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom. No older than 15 years. I would really like for it to be on half an acre, and I want it to be within 10 minutes of Cabot. And she's like, bet, I'm on it. You go back to doing what you got to do, and I'll get to working on this. And you find the perfect property. All right. So now what happens? Now it's time to start considering making an offer.
Right.
Okay. So what are the things that we need to kind of consider when we look at making an offer? I would argue one of the very first things is, how long has this property been on the market, right?
Days on market.
And that street runs 2 ways. You could have a property that's been on the market for 6 months, and you found this property, it's in your budget. We should start asking some questions here. Why has this property been on the market for 6 months? The other side to that is the property has been on the market for 6 hours. Okay, so if we're in that situation, is it possible that we need to be super aggressive with our offer? And this is where the value of a good real estate agent cannot be overstated, because somebody like Nikki will help you kind of navigate those waters.
Right.
This is what I'm seeing based on the information that's out there. This is how long it's been on the market. These are the comps. If you were to buy something similar that's 10 minutes down the road, this is kind of what you'd be looking at paying. This is how long on average homes have been sitting on the market. Based on what I'm seeing, if you're serious about this one, you might want to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. Let's say it's been on the market for 6 hours, or the other side of that, it's been on the market for 6 months. Well, I'm getting, I'm seeing, and I've heard through the grapevine that it's kind of struggled with inspection because of a floor issue or because of electrical. Okay, well, if you're an electrician and you're looking at buying this,
who cares?
That might not be a big deal.
That might not be a problem.
And you might be able to leverage that, right? You might be able to leverage that to maybe get a little bit of a better deal. But as I'm talking through these data points, I think you can see very quickly where the offer and the counteroffer piece, there is a strategy to this. And that's something that, as we've told you from the beginning, I would always defer to your expertise on, what goes into a solid offer, counteroffer strategy.
It's really funny that you say that, because that is probably one of the biggest differences in most agents, and the detail and the work that goes on behind the scenes, because there are agents out there that will say, and I'm not naming names because this would be bad, but there are agents out there that say if it's worth it to them, it's worth it. And I don't disagree with that. You know, you're not wrong,
But if you
but they're
take that
not making an informed decision.
Exactly. If you take
and
that
that's
approach,
not
yeah.
right. Like, thank you for saying that, because it does. It drives me, because I'm just like, but my job is to protect you. Literally, our oath, and we were talking about this earlier in my office today, and that is another big perk to making sure you don't have to be with the most experienced agent. They don't have to sell 1,000 homes a year, but they need exposure to the market. That is the biggest difference. Even if they've had their license for a week, but they work with top producing agents, they have the knowledge at their fingertips, and they're not afraid to ask questions.
Right.
They're still just as powerful as an experienced top agent because they have access to the same information. But someone that doesn't look at that for you, like, that's one of my biggest beefs. I'm like, not that you're wrong. Yes, it's their money. At the end of the day, if they want to spend it, they want to spend it. But to me, it just means so much more than that, because, like, I always joke at my listing appointment, like, when I first meet people, I'm like, or my first buyer agency, I should say, is I sit down, you know, we start talking about the process, the steps 1 through 5, which is so perfect. And I always say somewhere in there, I'm like, look, I'm not going to walk in and sell you a home. That's not my job. Yes, I'm in sales. Yes, my income is even based on sales. But my job is to protect your fiduciary interest. That is literally the oath I take. And I take that very seriously, because one day I want you to call me back to sell it. Whether you sell it in 2 years, whether you sell it in 20, I don't care. I want to be the one that you go, Nikki's my girl. She's going to have my back. Like, and if I don't tell you about the red flags I see, and if I don't tell you, hey, like, they listed it high, they have multiple offers, like, it's clearly worth it to more than even you, even in those circumstances. But just know, if you don't stay in this home at least 3 to 5 years, you have no equity to work with. So don't be upset with me if you need to sell it and I walk in and say it's going to cost you.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of agents out there that don't see it that way. And it's just, we all operate differently, and they
just want to get a paycheck.
Right.
And we've seen that. We've worked with a couple agents that.
Your words.
Yeah. We've worked with a couple agents that they didn't care. They didn't point things out that they should have pointed out to us. And then after you close and you part ways with them, like, you never hear from them again. And where you're different is, like, you become family at the end of it. And so we, like, stay in touch with you. Like, we moved to Mississippi, and, like, we were friends on Facebook.
And you're not even that active on Facebook.
I know. So
I had to check on my girl, though.
Yeah.
I will offer this for the viewers' consideration, and this is a little bit of a cynical take, but I consider myself a pragmatist, right? The world I live in is the real world. So this is just how I see it. I'm not a real estate agent. I don't represent any real estate agents. We're just sitting having a friendly conversation. But the way I see it, as someone that has, you know, purchased 8 homes and sold 7 homes, I see it like this. In step number 2, you're finding the right home, right? So you've decided on a real estate agent, you're finding the right home. Part of a good agent's responsibility to their client is to help them with their blind spots, okay? So if you are an agent and you have a client and you're taking the position that it's their money, they can spend it how they want to, you are doing your clients a disservice, because they have blind spots. Your client is coming into your world, not the other way around. And I think that's an important distinction to remember, because you have somebody that is entering a space, and at the end of the day, when you get to the closing table, it's their signature that's on the closing settlement, right? So when they walk away and now we've closed, right? And 3 months has gone by, and the excitement of buying the new home has worn off, and now the reality of living
and you
that
have
home
to fix something
has
or
settled
replace
in,
something, or
and now you're having
something
to replace
breaks.
things. You're having to, you know, all of those, like, life starts to kind of hit you, and you're like, man, like, I wish I would have thought to ask about this, or why didn't I get advised on this? Like, I didn't even think about this thing, you know. So you know, and I don't want that to come across too harsh, because I also recognize that every agent is going to have their own personality. They're going to have their own approach. They're going to have their own style, and I don't want to detract from that. But I'm simply saying, if the position that you're taking as an agent is, well, it's their money, they'll spend it however they want to, and you haven't done what you can to help advise them on their blind spots, you can talk until you're blue in the face and educate people on everything that you want to, and they might still decide to walk down this path. And you know what? That's okay, because you can go into it with eyes wide open that you have disclosed, and not disclosed, but you have guided them, mentored them, and helped educate them along the way. That's their decision to own, right? But if you haven't done that piece of it, then you've kind of done them a little bit of a disservice.
Completely agree.
I don't mean to get on a pedestal because we've been the recipients of that, right? We've
Yeah.
had those agents.
Me too. That's why I got into real estate.
Yeah.
It's literally the number one. It's funny. I think I might have said this in our last interview. Like, I literally have a Facebook post that I love to share because I literally said buying a home is the worst thing I've ever done. I never want to do it again.
Right.
Because I had an agent that didn't care, didn't help me with the inspection, didn't help me with anything, didn't give me any advice, didn't give me anything to look at, consider. He just said, which one do you want? I'll write the offer. He said, hey, you're supposed to schedule inspection. Didn't say like, oh, like these are people that I've worked with, or like, you know, look into this or look into that.
Right.
None of that. Didn't help me with any of it. I worked with, I shouldn't say the bank name because I would get in trouble. But I worked with a big bank, and this is another big like drop on the lender thing, is I worked with a big bank. My closing costs were insane.
Right.
Like, and it was a nightmare getting through to people because I like to know things.
Right.
And so trying to call someone at the 9 to 5, 1-800 number, oh, well, I'm not working on that part. You got to talk to so-and-so. So-and-so's not in today. You know, like, I did it. It's not fun.
Yep.
It's not fun. So,
Yeah.
sorry. Keep going.
No.
Phase 3?
That's good. Yeah. So right. So in step 3, you know, you've got your realtor. You found the home that you want to make an offer on. Now we're in that offer, that counter offer strategy. You know, and another thing that an agent is going to help you do in managing your expectations, and this is really kind of targeted specifically to the military community, just because of my background.
I'm here for it.
But you know, especially if you're military, and even if you're not military, if you're moving from one market to another, you should understand that there is a very high chance that the market you came from is not like the market
Polar
you have
opposites.
gone to.
Yes.
Right? You can go from state to state, different market. You can go from city to city in the same state. You can go from one part of the county to another part of the county.
Yep.
And it's a completely different market. So managing your expectations,
true.
but a good agent is going to be that person. And I keep circling back to this, but that's going to be that sounding board.
That's the benefit.
That's
It is the benefit. It is the benefit of having a professional that does this. I loved how you said it. Sorry to hijack this, but how you said, like, the average family, you work a job, you go to your job, and then you come home and you have your kids and things like that. Like, I tell people, this is my job.
Right.
Like, this is 100%. I spend all day immersed in real estate.
Yep.
And I mean, I say Central Arkansas. I mean, I try to stay within an hour because after an hour, I do get into I don't drive through that city regularly. I don't talk to people in that city, like, that is such a good example, though, but that is a value, whether you're buying or selling. Either way, you can definitely do it without a realtor. And can it save you money? Maybe.
It depends on how you qualify that.
And exactly. And that's what a lot of people miss. Like, even the listing side, people are like, oh, well, the average listing commission is X, Y, Z. Well, the average that a for sale by owner loses is almost double that.
Right.
And that's when you start talking about inspections, negotiations, things like that. And when you get an offer and counter offer, that is where the value shifts big time.
Yep, absolutely. And I do want to be clear, we've operated on that side of the line as well.
Right.
So we're not an expert in anything. We've experienced just a little bit of everything. So our first 2 homes, we sold for sale by owner.
Yep.
Here's the scenario. Somebody I worked with, they had been to my house multiple times.
Yep.
I was junior enlisted, younger, you have the little parties and stuff. And so it was people that, they could afford it. They had already done the budget thing. And that was okay. But knowing what I know now, and I look back, I'm like, that was kind of a risky play because something could have gone sideways. I wouldn't have been protected.
Right.
Or here's the other thing. How much money did I cheat myself out of because
if you would have listed it?
Because I didn't know what the market kind of commanded. I came up with a number that just kind of made
Felt
sense.
right.
We had a handshake deal in the smoke pit, and then we're getting the bank, and then and so
It closed.
it closed. We sold it, so can you sell a property, as a FISBO for sale by owner? Sure. That is not what I would recommend anybody do. And we've sold for sale by owner as well. Again, if we had maybe gotten with an agent, I think there is a risk tolerance that you have to assign to your decision making. And it all comes down to what level of risk are you comfortable with.
Yes.
And once you've identified that risk, how are you going to mitigate that risk? Well, in the for sale by owner space, there's no real way to mitigate that risk. You don't know what you don't know. You have blind spots. And so my advice to anybody would be, I know people get hung up on the percentage, the commission. There's a reason for that number. And oh yeah, by the way, not a lot of people realize this. everything that you're doing behind the scenes is coming out of your pocket.
Right.
The social media, the video shoots, the advertising, the all the things, the being at a house on a Sunday and then trying to cover 40 minutes worth of distance in 20 minutes because you have another one that backs up, and
What are you talking about? That's not my life.
so there is just like anybody else gets compensated for their profession. I think it would be silly for people to not assume that a real estate agent is any different. There is effort, time, energy, resources that gets expended in your profession,
Right.
and it is only reasonable that compensation come on the other side of that.
I think the problem in our industry, just to sidebar that a little, is the difference in the great agents and the ones that are just there for a paycheck that do it. And I don't want to come for part-time agents, because I do know part-time agents that are phenomenal agents that actually make sure that they are doing right by their clients, even though they're part-time. But unfortunately, that's the majority of people in real estate. Unfortunately, this is a part-time gig. It's not most people's full-time job, because it's not sustainable for most people, because it does take so much work to do it right. And it's funny that he's actually like one of the lead instructors for the state of Arkansas, but he said to do this job well takes extra time, and most people aren't willing to do it. And that's just the unfortunate truth.
Absolutely.
But I think that is the biggest difference, is the value isn't there for most people, because most people have had a bad experience. And they're like, it's a waste of money. They don't care. And I hate that. I hate it so much, because it's like, wait a minute, there are ones that do. We do.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, because at any given time we're kind of the amalgamation of our experiences up to that point. And unfortunately, a lot of people have had an experience kind of like you just outlined, where it was a poor experience, and so. But circling all that back to kind of our 5-step thing. So in step 3, we talked about the counteroffer strategy. I would submit for consideration that this is going to be the most nerve-wracking step that you're going to be in, because now you're talking real numbers. There is a real piece of property that's on the line, and once you kind of it's like this dance that we're doing right with the seller. And so once we kind of land on this line and everybody's happy with it, and we get this thing wrote up and it's under contract, and we're about to go into step 4, which is get your ducks in a row. I would offer that step 3, the counteroffer strategy, is kind of the most stressful. Step 4 is the step that you have to take the most ownership, because this is where you start driving the car a little bit as a buyer. You're contacting your lender and saying, this is when I'm projecting my closing date. Do you need anything from me to get all of my finances?
You really got to get all the docs in.
You need to get that inspection scheduled as soon as possible. An inspection, you could have a whole segment on inspectors alone, because newsflash, not all inspectors are created equal.
Either.
Do your research, right? If you have an inspector you've reached out to that has really good reviews, a reasonable price, but they're super backed up, there's a reason for that. It's because they're good at what they do.
It's usually a good sign if they're not available tomorrow.
Right? Yeah. So don't get what I would
It's a
encourage
bummer,
people,
because you do want to do it as fast as possible, but you have to mitigate the risk.
Exactly. So now, we need to get that inspection piece covered. And if you are just willing to be a little bit patient, that will pay dividends. We have had inspections where, they were able to get out the next day. I can get out there tomorrow, and, it's a very fair price. And then you look at the inspection report and it's like, where's the rest of it? Is there,
Right.
It's got 4 exterior walls. It's got a roof. It's got some electric. Everything looks good to me. Like, that doesn't really help me, right?
No, that is something Haley and I have been really driving home this year, is the reports themselves, because now we see so many, because, we are high volume at this point, and, but that is part of it. You see some reports that's a PDF that's 20 pages, and then there's not really anything to pull.
There's no meat from it.
No. Yeah. And then you get another report from another, and there are ones that are too detailed too, where that can be overwhelming, where you note every single tiny corner of the house. It's very hard to find the perfect balance to anything, but an inspection especially.
Yep. So this is where you're really going to kind of get your ducks in a row. So you're getting that inspection done. Okay, cool. So you find a good inspector, which, by the way, a good real estate agent should be able to point you in the right direction. Your blind spots.
We should care about it.
Blind spots, right? You're coming into this space. We've had 2 specifically phenomenal real estate agents you and our agent in Mississippi. I don't know if I can say her
She
name.
is fantastic.
but
Crystal Boggs.
Crystal
Give her a shout
Boggs.
out. She is in the Biloxi area.
Yes.
She was, and I've sent many referrals across the nation, and she is one of the top ones from my experience too.
Just amazing.
She's great.
So two real estate agents that have been wonderful, but both were very similar in that there was kind of this packet of information for their potential buyers. If you don't already have a lender picked out, here's some options maybe you can consider. If you don't already have an inspector picked out, here's some options that maybe you can consider. If you haven't already kind of decided on a title company, this is a place that we've used reliably.
Right. And also not just one.
Right, yeah, not
Because
just
that
one.
can be a problem. We were
Exactly.
talking about that in my office today too, just the ethical issues behind if someone is specifically partnering with one person only, and don't get me wrong, I naturally have favorites.
Yeah, sure.
It just human instinct, and you get familiar with people and comfortable with people. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not guilty of having favorites, but I still make sure I give options.
Right.
Because my
absolutely.
favorite doesn't mean it's your favorite, and my personality might not be perfectly yours.
Right.
And that is unethical, though, to just straight up be like, this person only, and this is your only option, and not even explain
Right,
that it's your choice.
right.
It is the buyer's choice. It is not the agent's choice.
Yep.
Now, if you look at your agent and say, you pick, that's on you. And people do that all the time. And I'm always like, well, listen, wait.
Right.
Not my money. Because people tell me that all the time. They're like, write it for what you think. Do whatever you think is best. And I'm sitting here like, I appreciate that trust so much. But it's really easy to play Monopoly when it's not real money.
Absolutely. Yep.
Remember, it's real money.
Yes.
Your real
exactly.
money.
Yep. So a good agent is going to have a variety of options at their disposal that they can kind of provide you and maybe point you in the right direction. And then, once you kind of get through that phase, that phase 4 of getting all your ducks in a row, as it were, now we got to prepare to go into that final phase, which is closing. And you have to remember at any point along the way, something can happen. Something can kind of knock things off balance. Like life is going to life, and life always happens
it does.
at the most inconvenient time. We used to kind of have this saying in a space that I came from. Bad things don't happen at 8 o'clock in the morning when you've had 2 cups of coffee and a good breakfast and a good night's sleep.
Nope.
That's not when bad things happen.
When you hook your sleeve on a door,
Right.
that never happens when you're having a good day.
Right, exactly. So just again, manage expectations. I said that's going to kind of be a recurring theme through all of these steps. But as you've gone through step 4, you get your ducks in a row. Now we need to prepare to go into step 5, which is closing. And one of the first things is my financing in order, right? So financing is good. That inspection in step 4 that we ordered, we should be looking at that report now. And now that we've gone through that report and we've kind of seen these are the things that have been identified, now we're going to go back and we're probably going to have some communication with the seller. We might be asking for them to fix a few things, or we might be asking for them to give an allowance for something.
Right.
Like, maybe the seller needs to be out of the house and, we're projected to close in 2 weeks. They need to be out of the house in 2 weeks because they're buying another property. Maybe they'll offer to give you an allowance for this thing that was identified in the inspection that they just didn't have time to get
Right.
a contractor over to work on or to
Right.
do themselves. We're going into closing. That inspection report has come back. The things that are identified in the inspection report have now been addressed.
Yep.
And we're getting ready to go to the closing table, okay? So one of the things I would encourage people when you're getting ready to go to the closing table is request that prelim ALTA, which is your American Land Title Association is what it
Love
stands
that you
for.
know that.
It's basically...
I bet realtors don't know what that means.
I had to look it up.
I'm proud of you for looking.
But I have this thing, anybody that watches this that knows me knows that James has a thing with not knowing what an acronym means. It's like, I've got like a list at work of acronyms.
No,
it's
you do
like
not.
This. I do. I can't even make
I'm
this up.
kidding. I know you do.
But yeah, so American Land Title Association. So that preliminary ALTA is going to break down what your closing costs are. And this is a really good opportunity for you to kind of take ownership of your closing process. And what I mean by that is get in there and look through it line item by line item. Coordinate with your lender, have a conversation. If you've got a good lender, they'll carve out a couple of minutes to help you understand things. You can also talk to the title company. The title company can help you understand, okay, when we put this line item on here, this is what that means. Title insurance, title search. That's what all of these different things mean.
Yes.
Which, by the way, do not ever purchase a property without title insurance.
Yes.
Ever.
It's possible, but yeah, it's a really bad idea. I haven't had anybody do it, thank goodness.
I've heard
But
stories.
there are a lot of sellers that come along, and it's funny because this is something I always joke about whenever, because there's additional coverage and things like that, and we have to disclose that and talk about it. I'm always like, well, this isn't Bubba's aunt's brother's land that's been passed down
Right.
40 times and never sold in this century.
Right.
If you're buying one of those, we're definitely getting additional coverage. Like,
Right.
well, that's not an option anymore. That's a must.
Yeah.
But there are sellers out there that are like that, and then they have no idea what the survey lines are, what the boundary lines are. They've never had a survey that those kind of things, and that's
surveys. Get your surveys. That's really good to bring up. And for anybody that is perhaps watching this that doesn't know, maybe it's somebody that is thinking about buying their first home and they're like, I want to watch a little bit of content and just kind of learn what the process is like. So for those that don't know, title insurance basically works like this. You purchase a property. If that property at one time had a lien on it and you didn't get title insurance, you bought the property and the lien that comes with it.
And the lien.
Right?
Which is really popular on solar panels.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Say it louder.
So get your title insurance and get a survey, especially if you're in a well-established neighborhood and a house that's been sold 3 or 4 times. Chances of the property boundary moving are pretty darn slim.
That fence line is the fence line.
But if you're in in the situation that we're in, so we're sitting here with Nikki, we're in our living room, right, in our forever home. Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're in that situation and you're on 5 acres like we are. We absolutely 100% got
Want
a
a
survey.
survey.
I want to know where the corners of my property are.
Yes.
Where does the neighbor's property start? If I go over here, have I accidentally stepped onto somebody else's
Right.
property, right? So get your surveys, get that title insurance, but prepare to go to the closing table is where we're going with this. And understand that things can come up with last minute. So I'll share a quick vignette of a house that we bought in Florida. So we bought 2 houses in Florida. We lived in one for about 3.5 years. We wanted to live a little bit further down the road. So we lived really close to Fort Walton Beach. We wanted to live in Navarre. And so it was time for us to move off of 98. I can't imagine living on 98 again.
Not now, especially.
But so we'd been in the first house for about 3.5 years or so, and we were buying a house in Navarre, and we were really excited about it. It was about the same amount of space, but it was on an acre of land, and it wasn't on 98. It was beautiful. And we had one of those agents, won't say any names, but we had one of those agents that just kind of communicated what needed to be communicated to close a deal.
At most.
And not really much else. Well, something happened last minute. So we sold the house on, we'll call it a Tuesday. We closed on the sale of our home Tuesday morning. We were closing on the purchase of the home at like noon on that same day. So we were going to close, have like 2 hours, and then close. All right. Something happened. There was something that didn't make it from the bank to the title office, and they were going to have to push things back potentially into the next day. Now, anybody that understands title space knows if you're changing a day, all of these documents have to get redated, and they were trying to work it so that we could slide in like the very last closing of the day so they didn't have to change all the documents. And ultimately, we were able to make that happen. But there's this narrow window that we're like, we don't have a home anymore.
Literally homeless.
Nobody is communicating with us like when we're going to have a home. And tried to contact the agent. They didn't respond. I went to their office. I drove to their office, walked in, and I saw who it was.
They were there?
They were there.
Not answering
And
their
I
phone.
was
Just
like-
avoiding it.
I was
just
like,
avoiding it.
what's going on? Last I heard, like there's a change.
Yeah, like-
nobody has given us enough. Well, that comes from the title company. I can't control that. I understand.
You're still kind of my middleman here.
I understand.
Like,
I understand you can't control that, but like help kind of.
you're the one that softens the blow. Like
Right.
that's your job.
And I'm not a real estate agent, right? I have to believe if I were in his shoes, I would have maybe
We've narrowed it down to a man.
found a way to at least communicate. Hey, this is what's going on. This is as much as I know.
I'm sorry. I know this is stressful. Like we're gonna get it figured.
Yep.
We're working on it.
And so
Something.
when it was
Something.
when it was all said and done, we wound up closing on the purchase of that home later in the day. It was like 4:30
It worked
or
out.
something. It wound up working out. But we had a fairly stressful 5 or 6 hour window in there that could have been completely avoided. The stress of it, not
Right.
the actions, but the stress of it
Right.
could have been avoided if they would have said, "Look, sometimes these things happen.
Right.
It's not the end of the world. I know somebody over at the title company. I'll reach out every hour and see if there's any
Right.
updates. Here, let me give you a good recommendation for a seafood place. you're already off work for the day. Go have an extended lunch,
Right.
and I'll call you when I know something. Even if that wouldn't have changed the calculus, it would have just made us feel
made you feel better. That's
right.
like I am in the job of executing legal documents. Like that is the most important part. But like more than anything, that's the difference in how people feel about us. Because I've seen people that are with realtors that aren't great at paperwork, aren't great at this, aren't great, but they're still good at making people feel good.
Right.
And they'll stay in business so much longer than the person who's great at paperwork and terrible with people. Like it's just it's double-sided. Like you have to be both, like to be phenomenal at this. But like at minimum you got to be good with people. Or you're never going to stay in business. Like so, I wouldn't be surprised if he is not in real estate anymore.
I would draw a parallel, right? So for anybody that doesn't know me, I spent a significant portion of my career dealing with the human interaction, without going into a lot of detail. And a piece that we learned along the way in that space is if you can help manage somebody's emotion, you can help manage their behavior. If you can help manage somebody's behavior, you can navigate to a desired end state, right? And that desired end state for any good real estate agent in a relationship with their client should be a smooth transaction. Whatever that looks like, that should kind of be the desired end state.
Yes.
And so getting back to the example that I just gave, if it had just been a little bit of communication, I don't need to be spoon-fed. I don't need to have my hand held. But I'm in a foreign space. Help me understand this. Help me navigate this. And that's really what I was not happy when I pulled up to their office and they were standing.
And they were there, not even doing anything.
I was not a happy camper. But either way, so we wound up closing on that deal. So I share that story simply to say, just because you've made it to step 5 and you're going to the closing table, life happens, right? Yes. You are dealing with a set of circumstances that have led you to this point, and we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are very human. They're going to do human things. Human things are going to happen when you least expect it. Be flexible is what I really want to underscore in step 5. Just be flexible and do as much expectation management as you can, right? So anything you would add to that, baby?
Not directly related to what you were just saying, but kind of. Do not make any large purchases before you close.
Yes. Yep.
Tell them.
Yes. Just because you're approved for the loan and like you're all the way through the process, they will check your credit again before you close.
The day of.
Yep. And
the underwriters
just went out and bought a new car.
Yes.
Or took on more debt, and then all of a sudden that changes like your debt to income ratio. Guess about you probably not buying that
house
anymore.
that day. No, that is such good advice. That is one of the pages I like to dog-eat ear in my buyer's guide. I'm always like, this is your Bible. Don't buy a car. Don't open a credit card. Don't do these things. If you have a loan for 30 days, it needs to stay the same. And it's so funny because it never fails. I'll always have someone call me and they're like, I'm going to spend like $200 at Target. Is that okay? And I'm like, we'll let that one slide. So now I kind of have a cardinal. Like if it's over $500, you might need to call your lender, but I love those phone calls. I'm like, I'm so proud of you for asking. Thank you.
So I would offer that is
you can
also
get groceries.
That's also a street that runs two ways, right? So taking on debt, but also having unexplained money that comes into your account, right? So if you are about
anybody knows my husband,
if you're about to buy a home, and here's a situation we encountered. So we were leaving Arkansas for the first time. We were going to be buying a house in Mississippi, and I had a side-by-side that I sold. And we owned it outright, in a little 12-foot trailer and everything. So, I get this deposit into my bank account for like $20,000, and we're getting ready to go close.
You're laundering drugs and money. Like, how dare you?
And we were able to explain it. We were able to show, hey, like, here's a copy of the title. Like, sold it to this person, moved from here to here. Like, it all wound up being fine.
So you're not part of the mafia.
But, no. But it was all extra steps that, I probably,
could have avoided by holding onto that check for a week.
Yeah. Exactly. So anyway,
that's very good advice.
Major transactions against your credit or against your account, one way or the other, out or in, are probably going to have to be explained. So whenever you are approved for your loan, like just kind of like chill until after you close, and then if that new SUV is still calling your name, head down to the dealership and do what you got to do.
Yes.
But once you have that credit locked in, just kind of let it ride until you've closed on your property.
Love it. Okay, so this is going to be off, grid, I guess. But just because you are such a numbers person, you've done this so many times, and because I do primarily help military clients, and a lot of them are buying their very first home.
Sure.
In Central Arkansas, which I know you have studied in and out, and you've bought and sold many homes here. An airman is looking to buy their first home with their family. Their wife stays at home because that's probably the most common thing we see. They're one income family. What do you recommend they buy? How do they find it, and why?
So the advice that I would give this young airman is the same advice that I would give to anybody else. I'm just going to scale what this advice looks like, right? So for somebody that has the budget of a young E4, maybe a dependent spouse that is stay at home because they have a 2-year-old that the spouse is watching after, right? So a family of 3, one income, E4. I'm going to give them the same advice that I would give somebody that is in their mid-30s, that has 3 kids, is very successful, triple-digit income. It's just going to be scaled differently.
Okay.
You can have a property that you add a sunroom to. You can add a bedroom to a property. You can have the best landscaping. You can do just about anything you want to a property to change the property. You can never change the location. I don't care how much money you have.
That's
I don't
such good
care
advice.
what you put into it. You can never change the location. So the first thing I would ask is, how long do you plan on staying here? Is this a 2 to 4 year solution? Is
Most
this
of them are.
a 5 to 10 year solution, right? So if we're talking specifically military, we're probably talking the 2 to 4 year solution. So I get back to having that honest conversation with yourself. So if you are anticipating this is a 2 to 4 year stay, most likely, then you also have to assume something else. I'm going to sell this one day, all right?
Very soon.
And when I sell it, what is going to be important to that person? Proximity to a grocery store, proximity to a daycare, proximity to a school, proximity to shopping, right? Proximity to a church, believe it or not. These are all some of kind of the key things that people are going to be looking at when they're looking at purchasing your property. So if we assume that those things are going to be important to that person, they need to be important to you too. And they need to be important now. So that's the same advice I would give to somebody that is maybe in their mid-30s with a bigger family. Do you plan on staying here 2 to 4 years? Do you plan to stay here 5 to 10 years?
Yes.
If you're saying this is your forever home, okay, well then maybe some things are a little bit more important.
Flexible.
Maybe you're valuing having a little bit of land and access to, other family.
Right.
Versus how much time it takes you to drive to town to go to the store.
Or to the base.
So the conversations would start very similar, and they might kind of branch out in different directions.
Right.
But for that young junior enlisted member that is looking at buying their first house, number one, congratulations. You're going to take an allowance that you're entitled to, right? It is an entitlement.
It's one of the best benefits you have.
It's wonderful, right? And
Tricare's okay.
and you're gonna leverage that. You're gonna leverage that in a way that if you're smart, you can probably make money down the road, because as long as you live in it, as long as that is your primary dwelling for at least 2 years, we can talk about the 2-5 rule, for at least 2 years. I don't know if you knew this or not, but whenever you go to sell it, you don't pay property tax on that if it was your primary dwelling. So that's what I want to encourage, a young junior enlisted member. If you're looking at a piece of property, do your research. Think about what's going to be important to that person that you sell to in 2 to 4 years. Make that important to you, but prioritize your location. Now, I'm not saying if you've got a great location, but it's crime-ridden, that you should throw crime out. Like, it's got to be a balancing act, right? But if
a realtor can't tell you about, you have to do your own research.
Oh, and we can have a whole conversation about due diligence. Google is your friend, right? But yeah, that's something that you should really kind of factor in. And if we're being honest, location, if that's something that you're placing an emphasis on, the crime rate for that area is probably going to be part of it.
Right, if it's a good location, it probably is, decent when it comes to that.
I think with all the houses that we have bought, we always chose like a great location, like somewhere close to the base, because everybody always wants an easy commute to work, like a safe area, because we knew we weren't going to stay there forever.
Right.
And then we would have no problem reselling it most likely.
Right.
And so I think with the forever house that we're in right now is the first time that we're like, we live a little too far from the base, but like we don't care.
It's worth
because,
it.
Yeah, it's worth it. To
Yeah,
us.
the privacy and the,
Yeah, we're
the
not-
extra
Exactly.
land and the, yes. So budget-wise, BAH and budget, should they be factoring in utilities into their BAH?
Absolutely, 100%. So for
So many don't.
for pretty much all of our
But I
purchases,
think it's so smart.
for all of our purchases up and until, let me think for a second here, up and until the house that we bought in Mississippi, and that one was a little bit of a unique situation because we were prioritizing different things at that point. So
Right.
all the other houses leading up to that, we would not buy a house unless our BAH would cover
Everything.
mortgage, utilities, and when I say utilities, I mean electricity,
Internet.
trash, internet. Like that is your, in some ways it kind of makes the math easy because you know your number.
Right.
But that's what I would prioritize. And now somebody might say, well, James, that doesn't allow me to get this, this 2,000 square foot house. Then you don't get a 2,000 square foot house. You get the 1,600 square foot
Yep.
house that, is maybe similar age, has a fantastic location, but you're not coming out of pocket because here's the deal. You buy that house this year. Here's what's going to happen after 1 January of next year. Your BAH is going to go up a little bit. Your base pay is going to go up a little bit,
So now
right?
you're making money.
So now you're making money. And then when you go 2-4 years down the road to sell that property and the market has matured a little bit, you're going to make money
You
there
have
too.
equity.
You have equity, right? This is how you do it.
Yes.
And you don't kind of drown yourself in
Right.
the idea of owning a home. I
Right.
think a lot of people romanticize the idea of owning a home. Here's the
Right.
thing. If you own a home, you have some significant responsibilities. That water heater out there goes out, you own that.
$1,000.
That's not, there's no landlord that you're calling for that,
No.
right? So you need to be able to account
Budget
for these
it.
things.
Yeah.
You got to budget for it. You need to have a little bit of emergency funding set off to the side. This beautiful home that you just bought, it doesn't really do anybody any good if that HVAC just went out and you can't afford to repair it.
Right. Would you say, because I've always heard, so could you look at numbers more than I do, 1 to 3% of your home's value is what you should be putting back every year for an emergency fund for your home?
I think that's a
that
pretty
fair?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty reasonable number. I mean, let's just use some very loose numbers. If you're talking a home that you purchased at $200,000, 1 to 3% of that, you're talking $2,000 to $6,000. If you're setting, let's just say $2,000, right? Well, then you're probably going to be looking at setting aside, a few $100 a month. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
For a rainy day, right?
Yes.
Now that's not money that you're putting in the stock market. That's not
Nope.
money that you're putting
It's
in your
accessible, liquid.
It's
If you need
exactly.
it, you can get it.
Exactly. So I think that 1 to 3% is probably a good number. I know that number's kind of been floated around the
Yes.
space, and I think that that's a very reasonable approach to take to having money set off to the side so that if you have that proverbial rainy day, there is a fund you can tap into that doesn't break the bank.
Right. You're not in shambles because of it. And no one, I try to tell people that all the time because there are a lot of people that are like, I just want to own a home. I just want to own a home. I just want to own a home. And, one of my first conversations is always closing costs, which
Right.
don't get me wrong. Like it is always my goal for my buyers. I don't want you to pay your closing costs.
Right.
Like that is something that I take very seriously. I want to try to negotiate that for you. Unfortunately, there are going to be circumstances where you're multiple offers or you're a really special, unique home or whatever it may be. You need to be prepared to pay them if you
Right.
need to. And there are so many people that are not.
Yep.
And then I have the very serious conversation of just know, like, if it breaks, it's yours.
Yep.
And that's when people will sometimes be like, oh, like, and I'm like, I don't mean to scare you, but you're going to call me when it breaks because I know people that can help you fix it. But if you don't have the money to fix it, then you're going to lose equity in your house.
Right.
You're going to have a house that doesn't work now. That's going to be a problem.
Yep.
And unfortunately, too many people want to rush into that owning a home and they don't prepare on
And
the back
speaking
end.
of closing costs, this is a good opportunity to kind of dovetail that back into the 5-step process. In step 3, when you're in that, you found your realtor, you found your home, now you're in that offer, counteroffer kind of phase, your real estate agent should be almost holding your hand in whether or not to ask for closing cost assistance. Does that make sense with how
Yes.
long the property's been on the market,
Yep.
where we're at, where we want to be?
Like I said, almost always it's the goal, but
Right.
sometimes it's not reality, depending on
Exactly. And so
That home.
So I think that bringing up especially closing costs, like there is a piece in that process where your agent should be able to kind of guide you on, well, you might want to be aggressive because the house has only been on the market for 6 hours, you know, and I'm being told that they've got 4 showings lined up. And, you know, if you just look at the numbers, chances of somebody getting an offer out of 4 showings when a house has just hit the market is
pretty high. Yeah.
Right. So
it's normally 1 offer in 10 showings is the statistic.
Yeah.
So you have to have 10 showings to get 1 offer. Obviously, sometimes it happens a lot faster than that. But if you've got 4 first day, that's a great start.
Right. And you know, and before we close out the 5-step process, one last thing that I want to revisit real quick is the finding the right home. Okay. So you did your due diligence. You've got that real estate agent that you just absolutely kind of connect with, and you've got a phenomenal relationship. In this step of the process, finding the right home, you are going to be just absolutely blown away at what your agent has access to that you're not even seeing on the MLS.
Right.
Both, not just one, both of our last homes you knew of before they were even on the MLS, to include the home we're sitting in right now, which is our dream home, right? So for anybody that doesn't know, there's a custom home builder in the area. He was selling his personal home and pursuing other interests. And because you have built a robust network and you knew kind of what our criteria was, you said, well, hang on, let me reach out to the Hales. This might kind of fit.
Yeah.
And before you know it, we were sitting in here at the kitchen table and having a conversation. And one thing just kind of snowballed into the other, and here we are. But even the home that we owned before this, you had said, you know, hey, like it's a new construction. I'm hearing that it is gonna, you know, I've talked to the agent. This is when they're planning on putting it on the MLS. This is roughly the price we think we're gonna kind of be around. And we were like, let's see what we can do to get this locked in. So having a good real estate agent and leveraging their network, you can't get that if you're going this thing alone.
No.
If you're doing this solo journey.
Right.
So, you know, I thought it was important to kind of highlight that because the value of a realtor in all of these steps can't be overstated, but especially when it comes to finding the home that meets your criteria, you get access to not just your agent, but the network that they have spent, in many cases, years building.
Yeah.
So I thought that was important to kind of highlight.
No, I appreciate it. It's so true. It's funny because I always tell people, I'm like, those are fairy tales and they don't come along that often. But the longer I'm in this, the more I'm part of those. And the more that I'm like, okay, this really is, like, the value is, it's there. It's undeniable. I mean, it ends up happening, and it's magical, and I'm honored to be part of them. But it's funny because I think a lot of people go to a realtor expecting that.
Right.
And it's like, that's not a guarantee by any means, but it is possible with a great agent.
Yep.
It's not a guarantee, but it is possible.
You can go to a car dealership and you can have a fantastic buying experience, or you can have a poor buying experience, right? And they've got everything kind of in-house. You know, we'll walk you back here. We can do the financing, and we can talk to this person, and they're going to tell you about the extended warranties and all that type of stuff. So, in that, most people would agree. I think I'm speculating here, but I feel like most people would agree that is a nerve-wracking experience. I don't personally know a lot of people that enjoy going and having the car dealership experience, right? And that's not an indictment on, you know, on car dealerships. It's just kind of the nature of how things work, because there's an angle they're working, there's an angle you're trying to work, you're trying to meet somewhere in the middle. And, you know, we're talking the average cost of a car nowadays is what, $40,000, $50,000. So I want you to 5 or 10x that number, right? 10x that number. And that is the person that you're selecting to go on this 2-month journey with you, because most closings you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that ballpark. At least. So, you know, don't sell yourself short.
No.
Do your due diligence, do your research, and most importantly, just be patient. Know that this is it's a labor of love, right? It is a time-consuming process. It takes time.
Yes.
Everything takes time. And speaking of taking time, one last thing that I want to hit on that I don't think we touched on before is, I said reoccurring theme here, managing expectations.
Yeah.
When you get to that point that you've got questions about a property and now you're in the offer, the counter offer phase, you have to manage your expectations on how much time this takes, right? So you as a buyer, you might have
I know where you're going.
You might have a significant other, right? And you guys have had a conversation. And you're like, well, we'd like to know about this thing. We'd like to know about that thing. Would the seller be open to this, right? So we come up with a list of 2 or 3 questions.
Right.
And we're going to have a group text, right? Because it's 2026, technology is real. So we've got a group text, and we're going to put that together, and we're going to shoot that off to you, where you're going to shoot that off to your real estate agent. Your real estate agent is going to go, okay, I'll pass this to the seller's agent. So when your real estate agent has a spare moment, because I got news for you, you're probably not their only client. You need to manage that expectation as well. So when the real estate agent has a moment, they'll get that over to the selling agent. When that selling agent, who probably has more clients, has a spare moment, they're going to get it to the seller. The seller, you might have one part of that party that's at work over here and one part of that party that's at work over here. And they might wait until they get home to have a conversation about what you've asked them about.
Right.
And that might be after the kids go to bed. That might be after dinner. And then they're going to send it back to their agent, who's going to send it back to your agent, who's going to send. So manage your expectations when it comes to communication. It takes time. There's a lot of parties involved, but it's important that those parties are involved and that everybody's paying attention and engaged, because everybody needs to be singing off the same sheet of music with this deal.
Yeah.
The agents, the person buying, the person selling, everybody needs to be singing off the same sheet of music.
Yes.
So it takes time, but there's a reason for that. I just felt like that was an important...
I appreciate that more than I could ever say out loud, because it can be a very hard thing. And it's funny because I am very much an immediate, when I make a decision, I'm ready. Like, I am not a sit and stew kind of person. It's something that real estate has actually taught me to do, because now I truly see the value in it of really diving into it and dissecting it more than just like, oh, this sounds like a good idea, let's go. And there's so many people out there. We are an instant gratification society, and we are not a barter society either.
Nope,
and that is going into a real estate transaction. It is probably the hardest hurdle that I have. And I love my clients. I mean, everyone knows I love my clients, and I try to keep everyone as happy as possible. But honestly, the most frustrating things I see from my clients when they get the most frustrated, it has to do with those kind of things. Like, don't those people want to answer us? Don't those people want to sell their house? I'm like, well, I had one today, we're probably not going to get an answer on the expiration. It's a widow whose husband has passed, and she's older, she's dissecting 30 years of memories, and is it worth selling for this? And do I really want to leave it?
Life has happened.
Yes. And so, and I've already texted my clients twice, hey, just a heads up, he already told me we might not meet expiration, things like that. But that goes back to, if they had a realtor that wasn't telling them these things, they would be sitting there on pins and needles. Why don't we have an answer? Why don't we have, you have to mitigate it. You have to iron it out. But going into it with that is very good advice. And I try to tell sellers too, sellers, the second someone leaves their house, they want feedback. And I'm like, they're probably looking at 20 homes today. There are buyers that come in town for one day and they look at everything in their price range that one day. It's we might not ever get feedback.
Right.
Because they might not even remember your house if it wasn't the right one for them. They saw so many. So I love that. That is, You can come get that disclosure when I meet every single client.
But
I'm gonna show them this clip of this video. Hey, by the way, James said.
But yeah, in a nutshell, that's really kind of that's really kind of the 5 steps that you're going to go through in almost any transaction.
Both sides.
On the buying side, right?
But both sides go that way.
There's a little bit more nuance on the selling side.
Yes.
And I think we might do more content at another time. We could kind of get into that too. But that 5-step process is going to be essentially the process that everybody goes through when you're looking at buying or selling residential real estate. You need a realtor. You got to find the home. There's going to be an offer, counter offer space. Get your ducks in a row. Lender, banks involved, all that stuff. The inspection is ordered, and then get ready to go to the closing table. Yeah. And there's a lot obviously that goes into each one of those phases. And I think that it can be overwhelming for people. But when
it's a lot of money.
It is. And it's a significant commitment. We're talking about, the experience where you're about to potentially spend more money or be responsible for more money than you have ever spent or possibly will ever spend. Right. This purchase that we made
and a 30-year mortgage in most cases. That's a 30-year commitment. That's another thing that I try to remind people, and they're they're just kind of you're signing up for 30 years technically. Right. I mean, I get it. You probably won't have it that long. The average is 9. It's actually ticking up right now, which is crazy. But it's because so many people have COVID rates that
I wonder
they won't get out of their house, and I'm guilty.
Yep. I wonder if it's the folks that had those beautiful 2% rates that they're I'm not giving
Before
this
COVID,
up.
the average was 5 to 7. Over the last couple of years, we've ticked up from 7 to 9, and now they're talking 9 to 12.
Oh, wow.
Which is wild. But we're in a tighter economy, and then people had fantastic rates that literally make it look impossible to interchange, which, I mean, luckily, and I mean, I had grandparents that gave me very great advice growing up. You pay yourself first. I mean,
Yeah.
that has always been something in the back of my head. And don't get me wrong, I'm not great at it, but I still do it. Even if it's pennies, you still give yourself pennies before you pay anybody else. So we're in a position where we can move if we want to, but it's one of those, we know now that we're in this place, now we're sitting here saying we have the best rental anyone could ever dream up.
Yes.
We have the most perfect rental in the entire world where we can literally double our mortgage and we will never have to worry about that house. If something breaks, the mortgage covers almost every repair we could need.
Right.
1 month's mortgage pays for the repair.
Yep.
And that is where I tell people, when we bought during COVID, everyone said it was the worst time to buy a home. You have no idea what tomorrow brings. Don't buy a house right now. Don't do it. Everything was a scare tactic.
Mm-hmm.
We are sitting in one of the best investments we could possibly ever dream of.
Right.
And we bought a house that needed work. In our first 5 years, we've been in our home 5 years. We've replaced hot water heater, HVAC. We replaced dishwasher. We redid all our light fixtures. We redid floors. We did it all. It wasn't fun, but we knew going into it, we saw the potential. And we partnered with the owner of Porchlight who told us, it might be at the top of your budget. It might be this, which some people, we did stretch our BAH. And,
sure.
and I don't recommend it. It's not always the best idea, but we also knew I was going back to work. Our income was actually going to improve, things like that.
Yep.
But that's part of it. You have to weigh it all out. But just to wrap it all up, what would you say out of anything and everything you've gone through in real estate, what is the best piece of advice you think you could give a buyer or a seller to make a good investment or just to enjoy their process?
I would say, and this is on the buying and the selling side, there is no replacement for information. There's no replacement for research. Do your research, whether you're looking at buying or you're looking at selling. A good agent should kind of be helping you navigate, this space and feeding you information and helping you with market insights and giving you kind of that expert level, that subject matter expert insight into this
Knowledge
space.
is power.
Right, knowledge is power. But you also have to take ownership in this. So if you think that you might be listing your house, in the next 6 months, start kind of getting a feel for it.
Right.
If for no other reason, so that you're not caught off guard, so that you're not blindsided when you have a house that you bought 4 years ago, you paid $250,000, and you think all of a sudden it's worth $400,000 now. It might be worth a little bit closer to $3. So.
I've never ran across anybody like that.
So so just do your research, and the same thing for buying. If you're looking at getting into the market and purchasing, especially your first home, I would encourage people to start 6 months out. Get a feel for the market.
I love that.
Get a feel for the market. Look at different neighborhoods. You can use those apps I was talking about earlier,
Yes.
red or blue, doesn't matter. You can use those apps to research what the home prices have been in a given neighborhood.
They do, and they'll timeline them out and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to take ownership in the process. If you're going to buy, sell, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it is your signature that's going to wind up on the closing documents. You need to take ownership in the process.
I love it. Thank y'all so much for doing this.
Thank
we'll
you.
probably have to do a part 2 at some point and keep going because this
sounds
is
great.
so much fun. But all right,
Awesome.
thank y'all.
You're welcome.